Welcome to Tailor Made with Nancy. I'm Nancy Taylor. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and today I'm going to show you how I made these 4 cards using the Let's Go Fishing Suite collection from Stampin' Up! This is video 1 of 3 of the virtual workshop. You can find out more about the suite on pages 78 and 79 of the new annual catalog. As you'll see, the suite comes with the photopolymer stamp set, with the coordinating die set. It also comes with a twisted rope 3D embossing folder, and it features some of our new in colors, boho blue, pebbled path, and wild wheat, in addition to misty moonlight, which has now become one of our permanent colors, and musty meadow. But we're going to use a lot of different colors today. We're also going to be using the deckled rectangle dies largely for these cards. If you subscribe to the virtual workshop, everything you need to make these cards, except for the ink, will be included in your card kits. If you enjoy making these cards and decide that you want to purchase any of the products used today, please consider using my host code and supporting my business. The first card we're going to make today is our vertical Tacklebox card. And this is the list of supplies of everything that you'll need to make the card. We're going to start off by using our piece of scrap white. So you should have 2 pieces of white, one of which can be the inside piece, and one of which we're going to use to stamp our images. So we're going to use a lot of colors in today's workshop. For this card, the colors that I used are as follows: boho blue, petal pink, poppy parade, which is my all-time favorite red, soft seafoam, and then instead of our memento tuxedo black, which we typically use for our stamped images, or at least we use a lot, we're actually not going to be using that in today's workshop. We're actually going to use as our base colors for stamping the images gray granite, smoky slate, pecan pie, and copper clay. And it's okay if you don't have these colors. I just wanted to show you these are the colors that I predominantly used when designing these cards. Feel free to use the ones that you like the best. And one of the first things we're going to do as we make these cards is figure out which ones you like the best, because your preferences might be different than mine. You might like a different combination of colors. And for this card, I also used, for this fun piece that is kind of a 2-piece situation, I used the copper clay and wild wheat Stampin' Write markers. And I'll show you a fun technique using those. If you don't have the Stampin' Write markers, you could feel free to just stamp this in a single color and then color it in, or use the other piece to stamp it, which we'll get to in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and gather together your colors, the colors that I'm using if you have them, and any additional colors that you want to try out. And let's start by getting your piece of scrap white and your bobber stamps. So if you're okay with testing it out with me, let's go ahead and take whichever color you think you want to use as the base. If you're using memento black, that's fine. If you want to use one of these 4 colors, or if you have something else in mind, that's fine. But I highly recommend that one of the first things you do in starting for today's workshop is using the colors you think you might want to use if you want to try the ones I'm using, and starting off that way with just stamping your bobber so that you can see what you like. So I'm starting off with my gray granite. I'm just going to go ahead and use my chamois to clean it off. Next, I'll use smoky slate. I seem to go back and forth between these two, and I find they work better with different colors, but I just really like having the option, and I like the idea of giving everyone the option. Plus, if you like both of them, you could use one bobber for this card and one bobber for one of the other cards that we're going to be making today. Or you could just save it for another project. Pecan pie. And finally, copper clay. And I don't know about you guys, but I've absolutely been loving both of those 2 colors. and using them a lot more than I thought I would. So just kind of take a look at how those all look. The color that I, in all honesty, have been leaning the most towards in all this is gray granite. I just like how it is a little more faded. It's got just a little more of a vintage look. But I also like the other colors. So the two I think I'm the biggest fan of are the pecan pie and gray granite. So for the bobber, the red that I tended to like the best is, as I mentioned earlier, Poppy Parade. So let's go ahead and try out our Poppy Parade. If you want to try Real Red, that's another really good option. And believe it or not, my next best recommendation is Calypso Coral. So those are the two that I'm going to show you. So just to keep it consistent with what I did, I'll start with Poppy Parade. And you'll notice you get a nice rich stamp here. So if that's not what you want, if you want it to look a little more faded, you can do a stamp off. And I'll go ahead and just do one of those just to show you. And that will give you a little more of a faded look. And that's using the same color. That's Poppy Parade. And next, as I said, I'll go ahead and show you Calypso Coral. Or feel free to use whatever other red you are torn between using. If you don't want to have your card match the design completely. This one is Calypso Coral. I'll just show you the stamp on and off. So choose for yourself which of those you like the best. And this will be the first piece that goes in our tackle box once we get to that point. So let's go ahead and clean off our lure. Right now, if you want to kind of look ahead to the other cards that we're making, just as a reminder, in case you forgot, the other cards we're making that feature the bobber are our horizontal card, which this one I did use Calypso Coral for, and I combined the Calypso Coral with gray granite. And for this one, I used gray granite and I used Poppy Parade stamped off. So right now, what I would recommend is, now that you've seen the color combinations, the options, go ahead and decide what are the 3 bobbers that you want to use. And I'll just go ahead and use 3 from the 4 that I just stamped. So next, let's go ahead and block our lure. This is the outline for the lure. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the colors that you're contemplating using for the outline. Maybe you already know after doing that little experiment which color you like the best or which ones you really don't want to use. So don't feel the need to do too many of them. But for this card, we're going to do 2 of that lure, 2 of this guy. And just looking ahead as we're Stampin' Up in the beginning, we're going to use 1 of them for our horizontal card, and we're not going to use any for our last card. So go ahead and basically let's stamp at least 3 of this particular lure. For this card, I did 1 in copper clay, and I did 1 in smoky slate. And this one I did gray granite, so I did 1 of each of the 3. So I'll just do that again right now. And I also find this is helpful to do, just in case one doesn't really stamp the way you like it when you're putting on that top color. Then you just have options. Or sometimes if you, sometimes if you don't perfectly position your die and you end up cutting it in a way that it's a little too off, I think it's helpful to have had other images just ready to go right through the cut and emboss machine. So this is just one of the tips, one of the things that works for me. And then last but not least, smoky slate. Oops, forgot to close this one. Sometimes I just dry it off that way. Okay, so now we have 4. Close up our inks. And now we're going to go ahead and, if you haven't done that already, go ahead and block the insert piece. That's this piece that allows you to stamp inside the lure. For this card, I used Petal Pink and Boho Blue. And for the other card using this, I used Lemon Lime Twist. But go ahead and do at least 3 of the colors that you think you're most likely to like, or do as many as you want so that you have options. Okay. So I'm going to start with Petal Pink. And I really like the way the pink looks with the pecan color. It's kind of like a pink and gold. I just think it looks really nice together. And I'll just go ahead and also do the pink with the copper clay. Just because it's that pink and gold type thing again. Okay. And then next I'm going to do Boho Blue. Oh, see, I'm glad I stamped another one here. Got to really make sure you put even pressure on it. And then finally, let's go ahead and do one with the Lemon Lime Twist for the next card. Okay. Let's do one more lure, gray granite, Lemon Lime Twist. I know the sound of that text message anywhere. That is my team. I have a really awesome group of women that I stamp with. If you're interested in joining my team, please reach out to me. My website is tailormadewithnancy.blogspot.com. Okay. And so last but not least, Lemon Lime Twist, which has become one of my favorite of the new colors, which I'm very surprised by. I almost wasn't going to give it a try just because I actually really like Parakeet Party and I wasn't ready to be done with it. Not that I am now, but I was just pleasantly surprised by Lemon Lime Twist. And a lot of the new colors that I was a little ambivalent about at first. Okay, so now we've done that. And as I said, last but not least, we are going to do the lure that has the little fish face on it, which is this one. So let's go ahead and get those blocked if you haven't already, as well as the little insert piece that lets you stamp the color inside. So I got my stamp blocked, and for this card I used Smoky Slate Pecan Pie, and for this card I used Copper Clay. For this card, you really do have the option to use any piece that you want here, but just in case you want to follow the design exactly, for this one I used Pecan Pie. So all said, we're going to need to stamp at least 5 of the fish lure to use between these 3 cards. So let's go ahead and stamp 5 of them using whichever color you like best for your base. As I said, I'm using Smoky Slate and Pecan Pie. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp 5 of them on my scrap. And for this card, I like to use a variation, so using Pecan Pie. Let's do 2. I have to say, of all the stamp sets that I have purchased from Stampin' Up, this is one where I really have felt that having different size blocks has really made a big difference. These tiny blocks especially, they're just, I don't know, they just seem to make it a lot more fun to use. And having the option of just being able to get really precise with your stamping. All right, and last but not least, I'm going to do one copper clay. And then I'm going to close my inks because I have a terrible habit of forgetting to close my inks. Okay, so just do one here. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight because it's not going to really matter when I cut it out. And now I'm going to close my base inks. And we're going to go ahead and get whatever colors we're going to stamp with for the inserts. And I'll just go over that one more time of the colors that we're using. And again, if there's other colors you want to test out, go ahead and use those instead or in addition to what we're using. I'm going to move that out of the way. Okay. So now we're going to start with our inside pieces. So for this card, I used wild wheat, soft seafoam. Now, I don't have wild wheat yet, but as I mentioned earlier, for this card set, I used these Stampin' Right markers. One of my strategies with purchasing the new colors when they come out is, at least for the in colors, every time we get a new batch, I like to purchase the Stampin' Right markers because I feel like it gives you the chance to see it from all angles. You can color directly on your stamps to see what it looks like stamped, or you can use it to color in your images. It's obviously not... I don't enjoy coloring with the Stampin' Right markers as much as the blends, but it gives you a preview and it helps you know which colors you really wanted to commit to. And I can say I ended up committing to all of them. My wild wheat is in the mail, on its way, but for now I'm using my Stampin' Right marker. So one of the techniques that I use is you take it, you color on the stamp, and then you put some hot breath on it. You just huff on the stamp. And then you stamp your image. And I am using wild wheat on one of our brown base colors. I just think that looks good together. But feel free to use it on whichever one you like. The next one is soft seafoam. So let me clean this off. And for that one, I used it on smoky slate. So I will go ahead and stamp on the smoky slate for the video. And then really nice thing about the photopolymer stamps is you can see right through it. It just makes a really pleasant experience stamping. You know exactly where it's going to go. You don't have to worry about blocking your stamp, getting your sticker on crooked, which I have a little bit of a hard time with that sometimes. Okay. Next, for our other cards, I used Pool Party, Lemon Lime Twist, and Boho Blue. So let's go ahead and get those colors. I really do feel like I used almost all of my ink colors when I was designing this workshop. But I do think that there are just so many options of what would look good. So if you don't have these exact colors, I'm sure it will not be difficult to find something that works equally well. So for this last card, I used Pecan Pie. And go ahead and stamp Pool Party. I don't love the way that came out, but for the sake of time, I will just keep moving on because we know it's not always going to come perfect. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And next, we'll use our Boho Blue. I do think some of them look a little better stamped off. So for Boho Blue, for example, I think that one comes a lot darker than I expect sometimes. So I'll go ahead and show you with the stamped off. And see, that just gives it more of a light, airy look. And I think I like that better than that harsh, stamp. Although for the bobber, I like it looking a little more harsh. And then last but not least, Lemon Lime Twist. Lemon Lime Twist is another one of those colors I really didn't know how I felt about when it first came out. It looked so washed out, but I I'm so glad I took a chance on it. I do love using it so much. This is one I don't stamp off with because it's already a plenty light color. I do really like the way it looks with the brown, coppery gold colors. So that's the one I use for that. So go ahead and finish stamping. If you're gonna do any other lures, just make sure that you have the amount that we've been talking about. Let's go ahead and put our ink away and clear out some space. We have one more piece that we need to stamp with, and being I did all of mine on one piece of scrap, I'm just gonna go ahead and find another piece of scrap, which I have a lot of, and we're gonna do our final lure, because then we're gonna take a break. We're gonna go to our Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and cut out all of these pieces. I definitely don't wanna have you sit and wait for me to individually cut out all of these pieces. So we're gonna go ahead and take a break in a minute after we do this last piece and cut out our components to our tackle boxes. So the last piece we're gonna use is this little hook set that has the feather on it. You'll see that there's one little extra feather. I've tried to do different things with it, like stamp on top of this. And I think that's what it's for. I don't know if maybe you're supposed to just do an extra little feather somewhere, but that's how I've been using it. So let's go ahead and get that last lure blocked up. And if you're gonna stamp it in one color, you can go ahead and stamp it in one color. I'm gonna use the Stampin' Right markers, and I'm gonna color it 2 different colors. So what I did for this one is I used copper clay, and I used copper clay to color, and I don't know, hopefully you can see, but I used it to color the little top hook here where I guess the line would attach, and the hook down the right side of the stamp when you're facing it towards you. So I'm going to go ahead and color that. And I also colored in these little feathers, which I suppose if you really wanted to get crazy with it, you could also color those little feathers in a different color, but I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to go ahead and just color it that way. And then I am going to color the feathers in using Wild Wheat. And we'll see how it comes. If it doesn't come good, you could always do something else with it. And I've definitely tried different things. So you find what you like. All right, and then we're gonna just give it some warm breath. We're gonna huff on it, and we're gonna give it a stamp and see what we think. There we go. I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks okay. All right, so now as promised, we're gonna take a break and we're gonna cut out our pieces. So for this set, you'll also see that you have, if you're doing the virtual workshop, you have scrap paper to do the bobber and the little stick that holds the bobber, as well as scrap boho blue to do the feather, and scrap silver foil to do the 2 hooks. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna pause the video, and let's go cut out all of our component pieces, and then we'll come back and assemble our card. Okay, so we are back, and I've now cut out all of the bobbers, lures, and feathery, whatever that is. Okay, so now let's take a look. This is the card we're making. There are still a lot of pieces to cut out, but it's okay. We're gonna get it done. So the next thing we're gonna do is let's start with our actual paper. We've only used one piece of paper so far. So let's go ahead and get the other pieces. Let's start getting our card ready. So let's go ahead, and now we've got all of our little guys. We can kind of set them aside, just move them out of the way for later. But let's go ahead and start assembling our card. So if you're starting from a whole piece of Misty Moonlight, go ahead and cut that in half just to make our standard regular fold. So go ahead and take your 5.5 by 8.5 Misty Moonlight, and we're gonna score it right in the middle at 4 1/4. Let's go ahead and do that. And if you have your bone folder, go ahead and use that to straighten out your edge. My bone folder is missing, sadly, and I had to just carry on. So I'm not gonna get that nice crisp fold, but I'm gonna be okay because I don't have a choice. Next, if you're starting with a whole piece of Pebble Path, do the same thing, cut it in half as though you're making two standard cards, and you'll see that our pieces are gonna line up beautifully side by side so that you can use half of the paper for this card and maybe half to make another card of Pebble Path. So we'll have our background and we'll have our little insert that goes into our tackle box. So let's go ahead and run this through the stamp cut and emboss machine, making sure that everything is facing down and not up. And I'll be right back. So as a word to the wise, even though we can line all of these dies up at once, it's really not a good idea to try to run both of them through the machine at once. It's not going to give you that cut out that you need. So go ahead and cut them out one at a time. This set has a lot of really small pieces, which really does lend itself to using washi tape. But for these larger pieces, it really shouldn't be necessary to use washi tape. There should be plenty of room for you to run this through the machine. Another trick, another tip, I guess, is just making sure that any little leftover pieces are not underneath your paper when you put your paper down for your embossing machine. I've had a few experiences where I suddenly have all these little dimples and I'm trying to figure out where they came from, and I realized that there were little tiny pieces of cutouts that I didn't clean off of my bottom plate that I should have. So when you do the piece that is the Tacklebox insert, you will see that one of the really cool things about it is that you get all these little extra pieces, all these little inserts, which you could use for something else if you're not going to use them. So it's up to you whether you want to use them. For our card, the only insert that I used was the Happy Father's Day one, and that is because I just found it easier to go ahead and do our heat embossing separately on a separate piece. So for that one, I just went ahead and saved the piece that was going to go in there, knowing that I was going to be able to heat emboss. And then these other pieces, I just went ahead and put off to the side to use them for something else. One of the things I thought about was whether this piece might be good for using if you have adhesive paper, giving it an adhesive back and doing it as a sticker where you just lay it down, because this is really thin. It is a little tricky to glue down. You can use fine tip glue or glue dots, which is what I recommend. I don't know that I would recommend using regular glue, but you know, we make do, we use what we have. So let's cut our next piece. Our next piece is a little more straightforward. It's a little thinner. It's gonna go through the machine with a little more ease than our Tacklebox insert. So let's go ahead and get my pieces back and cut that last piece. And what I like about this is there's just very little waste, just a lot of little pieces that you can use again for other projects. Keep in your scrap box if you have one. There we go. Now we have our little background piece. So we can go ahead and set that aside. Our pieces back into our die set, which we will need to use these again for the next card, but we can save a little bit of cutting for the next one. And we still have a lot more cutting to do for this one, but we'll try to do it together and make it go quickly for this part. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and use whatever adhesive we're going to use to put our background piece on the front of our card. So I'm going to use Stampin' Seal, which I've just started using. I finally stopped using, I didn't really stop, but I finally made the switch from my original Tombow Stampin' Up tape runner to this, and I've actually been enjoying using it. It's a little, takes a little getting used to. I'm not 100% sure I've mastered it, but it's nice to use the current stuff. Okay, so we can just push that down. And since we're gonna do some heat embossing, let's go ahead and get that out of the way. So let's set aside these pieces and let's go ahead and get whatever it is that you use for your embossing. If you don't want to emboss, if you don't have a heat embossing machine, or if you want to use white crafts, or if you want to use, you know, just some Memento Tuxedo Black, you can do that as well. Just go ahead and use whatever works for you. I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I heat embossed. So I'm getting my heat gun set up, and I'm going to show you my embossing kit that I ordered, which I had in time for the last video, and I don't know why I didn't use it. But this is a really awesome set that Stampin' Up sells. I keep it all together in the box it came in, just to make life easier. And I'll show you how I use that for this set. So go ahead and use this bottom piece. Let me get this out of our way. It's our base to just keep everything nice and neat. So we're gonna go ahead and get our Versamark ink, which is what we use whenever we heat emboss. This gives us that watermark look. So go ahead and we're gonna get blocked, whichever sentiment you want to use. And one of the nice things, again, so you have this little piece, you can kind of look at the card box. These represent the actual sizes of the stamps, so you can see what would fit. So we know that you can use Happy Father's Day, if you want to use So Glad You're My Dad, or if you want to use Happy Retirement. You may even be able to fit Good Things Come to Those Who Wait, but maybe not for this card, because we want this one to go side to side. That would be a good up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and use Happy Father's Day. Father's Day is coming up. I think this would make a nice Father's Day card. So I'm going to go ahead and get that sentiment blocked. And I'm going to ink up my stamp. I'm not going to use my embossing buddy. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp. And then I'm going to find my white embossing powder, and I'm just going to pour a little bit on. Okay. And then pick it up carefully, do tap, tap, tap. The kit itself comes with this little paintbrush that you can use to get off any excess. I actually don't always mind the excess. I think it kind of gives it a little more texture, but you do have a way to get it off. And if you accidentally were to brush off all the letters, one fun trick I learned is you can go ahead and drop it right back down in the powder, and that Versamark is going to stay put, and it's going to allow you to keep your image, which is nice to know. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my embossing, my heat gun. Once you are sure you have a working power source, go ahead and turn on the gun. Let it get hot, and then once it's hot, you're going to hold it above your image and just make a circular motion. And you're going to watch and wait until you see the letters liquefy, which is, I don't know about you, I find it very satisfying. And once you see that happen, once all of the letters have gotten that beautiful glossy look, you'll know that it's okay to stop going. And there you go. Go ahead and turn off our gun. I'm going to leave it plugged in. We're going to set it on the little metal edge so that it cools off and we don't burn down the house. We are going to use it for the next project, so we're not going to go ahead and use this to clean up just yet. We do have more to do with this, so I'm just going to set all of this aside, and we can come back to it in just a little bit. And let's continue assembling our card. So where we left off before was we put on the bottom of our tackle box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that piece that we just did and we're going to figure out how we're going to lay it out and where that piece is going to go. So get everything oriented, and we're going to put a little bit of glue or what adhesive, whatever you're using, on the back. And oops, I just told you I learned how to use this. Okay, sorry. And go ahead and put this down where it is going to go. I kind of just like to lay it down without pressing it down, just to make sure I put it in the right place, and then kind of just figuring out where I want things to go and moving it around a little bit before I lay it down, before I press down on it in a permanent way. And I know if you're using glue, it's obviously going to be a little more forgiving, but you can still move it around as long as you don't press down on it. I think that that looks about right to me. Maybe a little more. And then, so once I like where it is, go ahead and press down on it. Now I can pick this piece back up and use whatever adhesive you're going to use. Like I mentioned earlier, you can use fine tip glue, which I really do love. I tend to be a little messier with it these days, so I'm going to try to use glue dots this time and see if we come up with a better result. So if you have a take your pick tool, I highly recommend using that when you're using glue dots for something like this. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to find all of those little points where the card pieces will touch. And go ahead and use your glue dots to put a glue dot on each of those. So I like to do the 3 right in the center where the tackle box insert joins to the back of the card. And then we're also going to go ahead and put glue dots on the corners of our tackle box insert. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the little edges here where it would be opening from. And just basically keep going until we have all of the pieces, all those points of contact covered. So this might probably be easier to do without glue dots, but I do think it's worth taking the extra time to use glue dots if you have them. I do think it's going to give you a better look that you're going to be happier with. But see what you think. I mean, we're going to make 2 of these, so maybe try making one of these using glue dots and making the other using the fine tip glue if you have it, or give it a try and use regular glue. All right, so once you've got those points of contact covered, we're going to go ahead and place our insert and use the grid paper more than just a protective surface. It does allow you to help line everything up just to make sure that you have all of those edges covered, making sure everything lines up nicely. So now we have that done. The next thing we're going to do is we're finally going to do some more stamping. So let's go ahead and get our stamp set, and we're going to go ahead and use this piece, which is going to give us a wood grain look on the inside of our card. Go ahead and get that piece blocked. And we're going to go ahead and do a monochromatic look, so go ahead and find your pebbled path, or if you don't have pebbled path and you want to use gray granite or smoky slate, go ahead and use that. So go ahead and get your stamp inky, and for this one I just went ahead and did all of the boxes except for the one with Father's Day. And I just basically centered them in each of the boxes just to give a little bit of texture to the surface. You can flip it around if you don't want everything going in the same direction. This is just how I did it. Okay. Go ahead and close up our ink and clean off our stamp. And now we're not quite ready to assemble fully. However, I think we can get some of the pieces out of the way. So let's look at our original card side by side here and figure out where we're going to start. So let's start with my favorite piece, which is the bobber. Go ahead and, as I said earlier, we did stamp a bunch of different options. So go ahead and see which of the images you stamped that you like the best. For this one, I originally went with gray granite and Poppy Parade, so I'll just go ahead and stick with it for this one too. This one came a little darker, but I think it looks okay. And for this one, we're going to use a dimensional. So just go ahead and get your dimensionals, and one dimensional should be enough for this one. So go ahead and put your dimensional on the back and position it so that it is pointing a little bit to the right. We want to give a little room so that we show that fun textured stamp we just did. And then we're going to go ahead and find one of our petal pink. Do the same thing. Go ahead and put one dimensional on the back. And this one we're going to angle the opposite direction. If you're using glue, you can move it around a little bit until you like the positioning. When you're using dimensionals, you kind of are stuck where you are, but you can always try to peel off if you're unhappy with it. For the little fish, go ahead and figure out which of the fish you want to use. I'm going to just stick with the original design. I know I put a lot of thought into which colors I wanted to use. And again, we're just going to use dimensionals. For this guy, go ahead and use two, one by his face and one a little closer to the tail. If you have mini dimensionals, you could use those. And for this one, go ahead and put one a little off to this side and one a little off to the other side. Okay. Go ahead and use two on this one as well. And position this one facing the opposite direction. And a little off to the other side. When you're happy with it, press down on it. Next, we're gonna take a look at our lures. Oops, one of mine slid away. So for this one, I used the boho blue lure. And we're gonna go ahead and use one dimensional on the back and position it so that the hook is facing up and to the right. And then we're gonna have a little more cutting to do. Oh, I can reposition that one a little. Okay. And it looks like we have everybody except our hook and feather. So let's go ahead and get our piece of twine. So I just went ahead and took a small piece of twine and cut it with my paper snips. And again, if you're doing the workshop, you should already have this cut for you, but go ahead and just cut a piece of twine if you're just stamping along. And for this one, there really isn't a whole lot of rhyme or reason. It's kind of just getting that twine underneath and figuring out how you want to make it stick and where you want it to go. So that it's going to cover all the pieces. So I kind of just put it where I thought it belonged. And then what I did was, instead of gluing that down, I just went ahead and got a dimensional. Sorry, I should have put my dimensionals on the right side of the screen. And I kind of used the dimensional to hold it in place. And then I peeled off the top. And once I did that, I took the piece and I placed it over, since this one's pretty wide at the base, and I kind of just pushed it down. So for this one, I made the string a little wider, but I think it's okay. But basically just play with it. You could always pull it off if you need to, and just reposition it to get it to how you want it. If you want it to have a different shape or you want it to be tighter, looped around. But what I wanted to try to do was have it to where the hook would come on and it would look like this was all connected. But just do whatever you think looks good. That's how I recommend doing it, using the dimensional to kind of hold it all in place. And then we're gonna next take our scraps that came in the card kit, or scraps that you have lying around, in boho blue, in silver foil, in poppy parade, basic white, and pecan pie. And let's go ahead and find the dies that we're going to use for these, and let's go ahead and cut them. So we'll go ahead and start with our little feather die. So go ahead and grab your boho blue scrap and let's run that through the cut and emboss machine. So this is one of those pieces where things get stuck. So if you have a take your pick tool, this is one where you might want to use your other edge, your sharp edge, so that you can find the little holes and poke through to release the paper. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and use a little bit of fine tip glue. And go ahead and put a little bit of glue right in the middle. When you're using this, try to not to get close to the edge, just in case you need to move things around. This way you don't end up making a mess. And for this one, I kind of like to have the tip of the feather right here on the hook, but do it the way you like it. There you go. Okay. And then we are gonna get our silver scrap. So let's find that piece. And we're going to find our hook. Oh, that's right. I had laid everything over here in my magnetic dish. And we're gonna make sure it's face down. We're gonna run that through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. So when you use this piece, it's actually going to go ahead and cut out 2 hooks. So you have your 2 hooks here. And for this is another piece. It's going to be a little tricky, where I really am starting to wonder whether this might be better with adhesive back sheets. But go ahead and use just a little tiny drop of glue, the smallest drop ever, and go ahead and figure out where you're going to place your hook so that it is in the tackle box. And then once it's there, I kind of feel like for this one, you got to just go with it. You can't move it around. It's such a small piece. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing with the next one. Just a little teeny dot of glue right where the tip of the fork is. And then we're going to go ahead and take that one and put it towards the bottom of the card. Again, once it's down, I think we kind of just go for it. Hope it stays. Try not to move it around too much. The good news is this is a tackle box. So if it does look a little bit wet, I suppose that's okay, because a tackle box will get wet if you go fishing. Next, we're going to take our scrap Poppy Parade, and we're going to use either of the pieces for the bobber. You can use, it doesn't really matter which way you put them on. Since my Poppy Parade is right here and it's a bigger piece, I'm going to go ahead and run it through with the base piece. And then you're going to find your scrap white, You only need a very tiny piece, and you're gonna run that through the machine for the other piece. Go ahead and this is another one where you, maybe if you need your pokey tool, you have it. So we have that. And then let's get our scrap white and run it through for this other piece. This is the kind of set where you really are glad when you know that you have saved a bunch of paper in your scrap box, because you only need really little pieces for some of these. I definitely don't like cutting down an entire piece of cardstock for little pieces like this. So now we have the pieces that we need there. And then we're gonna go ahead and take our scrap piece of pecan pie. And the next piece we're gonna use is this little stick, which is the stick for our bobber. And now we have all the pieces for our bobber. So let's go ahead and get those together. We're about to be done. This is the last piece except putting in the insert, which I've been trying to train myself to do at the very beginning, but you could always do it at the very end if needed. So how I like to do this one is I start with my bobber stick and use a little bit of fine tip glue. I literally just do dots because this is, again, not very forgiving. I am really wondering if I need to try this again using adhesive back sheets. I might have to do that and just kind of lay it down, push it down, and commit. Feel like you don't really get a second chance at this one with the glue. And then we're gonna just take a little bit of our fine tip glue and put it on the back of the red piece of our bobber, or whatever you use for your larger piece. Kind of get it centered, and then just move it around as needed, as little as possible, hopefully. And once that is down, give it a good press. And then last but not least, we're gonna take the final piece of our bobber, make sure that we're using the back. Although I've definitely heard it said that it doesn't really matter if it's the front or the back, which I pretty much agree with. But go ahead and get your glue. And then we're gonna position that so that we drop it right on top. And by putting the glue in the center, that gives us the ability to move it around as needed, wiggle it just a little bit so that everything lines up. And there you go. We have finished our Tacklebox card. All that is left to do is take that last white piece and put our glue on it and whatever you're using for adhesive, and put it on the inside of our card. If you want to stamp something on the inside, you can stamp something on the inside. If you want to leave it blank so that you can write a message, you can do that as well. But either way, card number 1 is done.